And if Genesis is indeed life from death,
both of these stories existed in summer 6,000 years before the Bible was written.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Though the book of Genesis itself doesn't name an author, both Jewish and Christian traditions credit the entire Torah, or Pentateuch, which includes Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, to Moses. However, over the centuries, this Mosaic authorship has been questioned and reevaluated. During the Enlightenment period, thinkers like Benedict Spinoza and Thomas Hobbes began to raise doubts about Moses being the sole author. Then, in the 17th century, a scholar named Richard Simon proposed an entirely different ideal. What if the Torah was actually written by several authors over a long span of time? He noticed some intriguing contradictions and variations within the text itself, like how Genesis contains two distinct creation stories. This ideal of multiple authors was groundbreaking and laid the foundation for future scholarship on the Pentateuch. Fast forward to the 19th century, and we find most scholars rallying around what became known as the documentary hypothesis. According to this view, Genesis and the other books of the Pentateuch came from four main sources: the Yahwist, J, Elohist, E, Deuteronomist, G, and priestly, P, sources. Each of these sources, it's thought, contributed to a larger story, which was then woven together by various editors over time. Scholars identified these sources based on patterns, like the use of different names for God, Yahweh versus Elohim, and the presence of repeated or parallel stories, such as the two creation accounts and the multiple instances of wife-sister narratives. The ideal is that each source originated in a specific time and place. The Yahwist source, for instance, may have come from the southern kingdom of Judah in the 9th century BC, while the Elohist source might have been written in the northern kingdom of Israel in the 8th century BC. The Deuteronomist was likely written during the time of King Hosea in the 7th century BC, and the priestly source emerged much later, possibly during the Babylonian exile in the 5th century BC. By the time Ezra brought the law of God from Babylon to Jerusalem in the 5th century BC, many scholars believe the Pentateuch, including Genesis, was in its final form. In more recent times, some scholars have adjusted this documentary hypothesis, suggesting variations like the supplementary hypothesis, which streamlines the sources down to just J, D, and P, with E seen as a variation of J. Others suggest Genesis' early chapters might have been written quite a bit later, possibly as late as the 3rd century BC. One particularly interesting theory that's gained traction is the ideal of Persian imperial authorization. After conquering Babylon, the Persian rulers allowed the Jewish people a measure of local autonomy, but wanted them to establish a single, unified law code. This setup meant that the two powerful groups in the community, the priestly families tied to Moses, and the major landowning families who traced their lineage to Abraham, needed to come together and agree on one text. This cooperation might have been crucial in shaping Genesis and the rest of the Pentateuch as we know it. All in all, Genesis is more than just ancient stories. It's the product of centuries of faith, politics, and community, shaped by multiple hands to create a foundation of belief. Whether we view it as divinely inspired, historical, or symbolic, it invites us to reflect on our origins, our relationship with God, and the lasting impact of faith on every generation. So, as we explore Genesis, let's appreciate the layers of tradition, history, and storytelling that make it such a vital part of our faith journey.